He folded the invitation twice before sliding it into the inner pocket of his blazer. The way a man tucks away evidence of something he believes he has already won. The card was cream-colored, heavy stock, embossed lettering. The kind of thing ordered from a printer on King Street West in Toronto, where the minimum spend was $400, and the woman behind the counter called you, sir, without irony. It read, "You are cordially invited to the annual Tech Forward Leadership Gala, an evening celebrating the architects of Canadian innovation." Below that, handwritten in blue ink, 3 words that were not part of the printed text. "Come see this." His name was Preston. Preston Aldridge, 44, VP of Strategic Partnerships at Nexvara Capital, a man who had spent the better part of a decade telling the story of his own ascent. With the practiced ease of someone who had rehearsed it so many times, the original had become indistinguishable from the revision. He wore his success the way some men wear a good watch, not for the time, but for whoever might be looking. The woman he had sent the invitation to was named Solène. Solène Ibarra. He had not spoken to her in 3 years. There is a particular kind of cruelty that does not announce itself as cruelty. It arrives dressed in civility, wrapped in the language of inclusion, and presents itself as generosity. When Preston's assistant forwarded the gala invitation to Solène's office in Waterloo, the accompanying note read, "Thought you might appreciate an evening among people doing meaningful work. Old times' sake. No hard feelings, I hope. No hard feelings." The phrase sat inside Solène's chest for a long moment after her assistant, a young woman named Brid, who had worked for her for 2 years and had learned to read a room the way a sailor reads weather, slid the printed email across her desk without comment. Solène looked at it. She did not pick it up. Outside the floor-to-soiling windows of her office, on the 12th floor of the Ibarra Innovation Center, a building that bore her name not as vanity, but as a condition of the naming rights deal she had negotiated with the University of Waterloo 4 years ago. The afternoon light was doing something particular to the October sky over Ontario. The kind of gray that was almost silver. She had grown up in a house in Brampton where the windows faced a parking lot, and she had learned to find the sky beautiful in its most ordinary iterations because the ordinary sky was what she had. She picked up the invitation. Come see this. She knew exactly what Preston meant. She had known Preston Aldridge for 11 years, had been married to him for 6 of those years, had sat across from him at their kitchen table in Oakville on a Tuesday night in March 3 years ago, while he explained to her, carefully, as though she were someone who needed things explained carefully, that he had been seeing someone else for 8 months, that it had become serious, that he was sorry in the way people are sorry when they have already decided, and that he thought it would be better for both of them if they acknowledged that she had always been the kind of woman who was, as he put it, more comfortable in the background. More comfortable in the background. She had not said anything. For a long time, she remembered that she had a board meeting in the morning. She remembered thinking that the azalea on the windowsill needed water. What she did not do was tell him that 2 weeks earlier, she had closed a Series B funding round for her company. The company she had been building for 4 years while also managing their household and accompanying him to every Nexvara function and standing at his elbow at every networking dinner and never once mentioning, in any room that mattered to him, that she had a company at all. She did not tell him. She let him finish. She said, very quietly, that she would have her lawyer contact his. She watered the azalea before she went to bed. The divorce was civil. Preston was pleasant about it, in the manner of a man who believed he was being magnanimous. He kept the house in Oakville. She kept everything else, which Preston at the time understood to mean the condo in Kitchener and the TFSA and the shared streaming accounts. He had not understood what everything else meant. He understood it now, which was, she suspected, the entire point of the invitation. Come see this. As in, look at me. Look at what I have become without you. Look at where I stand. She looked at the invitation for another moment. Then she handed it back to Brid. RSVP yes, she said. And call Daphne. Tell her I need a driver for Thursday. Brid called Daphne. Daphne, who ran the operational side of Celine's personal affairs with the same energy she had once applied to running logistics for a mid-sized film production company in Vancouver, made 3 phone calls and had arrangements confirmed within the hour. There would be a car. There would also be 2 members of the security detail that had accompanied Solène to public events for the past 18 months, ever since the Globe and Mail profile had run under the headline The Quiet Billionaire. How Solène Ibarra built NextWave from a spare bedroom in Brampton and changed Canadian tech. Solène had not loved the headline. She had never been comfortable with the word billionaire in proximity to her name. Not because it was inaccurate, but because it changed the way people looked at her. And she had spent enough of her life being looked at in particular ways that she had developed a careful relationship with visibility. But the profile had run. The photo had run. Her at her desk, no makeup, reading glasses, pushed up onto her forehead. The kind of photo that people called approachable when what they meant was not what we expected. The interview requests had multiplied. The invitations had multiplied. The security had become a practical consideration rather than an affectation. She did not think of herself as the kind of woman who arrived places with security. She thought of herself as the kind of woman from Brampton who had learned to write code at the public library on Bramalea Road because her family's computer had a broken keyboard, and she had made do. Making do had been, for most of her life, her primary skill. The Tech-Forward Leadership Gala was held at the Fairmont Royal York, which was the kind of choice that communicated seriousness without imagination. The ballroom had been dressed for the occasion in the industry's preferred palette, navy and silver, clean lines, the odd fern. A string quartet played near the entrance in a way that suggested culture without demanding it. The name cards on the tables were laser printed. The champagne was Ontarian, which was either principal or budget, and Solène suspected the latter. She arrived at 8:14, not fashionably late, not fashionably late, just late enough. The car stopped at the King Street entrance, and Daphne, who had come along without being asked, because Daphne did not wait to be asked, stepped out first and had a quiet word with the hotel's event coordinator. Then Solène stepped out. She was wearing a black dress, a column of charcoal wool crepe that fell to her ankles, no embellishment, tailored in a way that cost more than the dress had any right to cost, and was therefore invisible to anyone who was not looking carefully. She wore her hair natural, close-cropped on the sides and full at the top, which she had been doing since she was 28, and had stopped apologizing for since she was 31. Her earrings were gold. Her watch was the same one she had worn for 9 years, a Cartier tank her mother had given her, the year NextWave filed its first patent, the year her mother had borrowed money from her cousin to buy it and presented it in a Shoppers Drug Mart bag because she had not thought to ask for a box. Solène kept the watch because of the bag, not despite it. The 2 members of her security detail, a woman named Geneviève who had worked at executive protection for 15 years, and a man in a charcoal jacket whose name Solène had never learned because he had not offered it and she had not pushed, fell into position without theater. They were not dressed to be noticed. They were dressed to be present. The first person to notice was a woman near the cloakroom in a green cocktail dress, who touched her companion's arm and said something Solène could not hear. The companion turned, looked again, and took out his phone. The second person to notice was Preston. He was standing near the bar with 2 colleagues from Nexvara, holding a glass of something amber, wearing the custom suit he saved for events where he wanted to be remembered. He saw her before she crossed half the room. She could tell because his posture changed in the specific way. Posture changes when the body registers something the mind has not caught up to yet. A small stiffening, a recalibration. She did not walk toward him. She walked toward the table where her name card was placed, third from the left, on the far side of the room, and she sat down, and she accepted the glass of sparkling water that the server offered, and she read the program. The program listed the evening's speakers and award recipients. Her name was 4th on the list. Innovation Leadership Award, Solène Ibarra, founder and CEO. NextWave Technologies, for transformative contributions to Canadian AI infrastructure and her founding of the Ibarra Access Initiative, which has provided technology education and startup funding to over 3,000 under-resourced youth across Ontario, Quebec, and British Columbia. She folded the program and set it beside her water glass. Across the room, she was aware of Preston reading his own program. She did not watch him do it. She did not need to. What Solène knew about Preston, that Preston did not know she knew, was this. He had spent the last 10 months positioning himself as the person at Nexvara Capital, who had identified her early, who had seen the potential in NextWave before anyone else had, who had. This was the version that had made its way back to her through 3 separate channels, been instrumental in her getting off the ground. He had said this at a conference in Calgary. He had said a version of it at a dinner in Ottawa. He had allowed the implication to settle wherever he went that his proximity to her early work had been formative, that there was, between his trajectory and hers, a causal line that ran in his direction. This was not true. Preston had never invested in NextWave. He had, in the early years of the company, consistently suggested she was overextending. He had, on 2 occasions she could recall precisely, referred to her work in front of his colleagues as her little project. He had, in the final year of their marriage, asked her, carefully and in the language of concern, whether she had considered that perhaps the startup world was not where her strengths lay. He had said these things. She had not forgotten them. She had also not mentioned them publicly, because she had not needed to. She had been busy. NextWave's AI infrastructure platform was now licensed by 4 provincial governments, 2 federal departments, and 17 of the 50 largest companies on the TSX. The Ibarra Access Initiative had, in the previous fiscal year, disbursed $11 million in grants and programming. The Series C had closed at $240 million. The Globe headline had been correct in its arithmetic, if not in its adjective. She had never been particularly quiet. She had simply not been loud in the rooms where Preston was listening. The evening moved in the way these evenings move. Cocktail hour conversation, the drift toward tables, the welcome remarks from a man in a navy suit who made a joke about hockey that landed softly. The first course, which was a beet salad with the ambition of something more interesting. Solène ate the salad. She talked to the man on her left, who ran a clean tech firm out of Halifax and was genuinely interesting, and to the woman on her right, who was a partner at a Bay Street law firm and had 3 children, under 5, and kept checking her phone with the particular guilt of a person who knows exactly where they would rather be. Preston came to her table at the midpoint of the main course. He approached from the right side, which she noticed, and stood at the edge of the table in a way that asked for her attention without demanding it. And she looked up from her conversation with the Halifax Cleantech founder, and she looked at Preston Aldridge, and she felt, very precisely, nothing that resembled what he had likely hoped she would feel. "Solène," he said. He smiled. It was a good smile. He had always had a good smile. "I'm glad you came." "I read the program," she said. "It looked like an interesting evening." He paused slightly at that. "Not long?" "You look well, Asemwell," she said. "How is?" She paused, not because she had forgotten the name of the woman he had left her for, but because she found she was not actually interested enough to complete the sentence. "Things are good," Preston said quickly. "Good," she said, and turned back to the Cleantech founder. Preston stood at the edge of the table for a moment longer than was comfortable, and then he returned to his table, and Solène did not watch him go. The awards portion of the evening began at 9:30. There were 4 recipients. The first was a man in his 60s who had built a medical devices company in Mississauga. The second was a research consortium out of UBC. The third was a young woman, 29, who had started an accessibility tech company in Winnipeg and cried when she accepted her award, and then apologized for crying in the microphone, and the room laughed warmly. The fourth was Solène. The presenter was the Deputy Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry, a woman Solène had met twice before in official capacities. She spoke for 4 minutes. She described NextWave's contributions to Canadian AI infrastructure. She described the Abara Access Initiative and its reach. She described, without naming the geography of it, what it meant to have built what Solène had built from where she had built it. When we talk about Canadian innovation, the Deputy Minister said, "We often mean the corridors, the universities, the venture capital offices, the Bay Street boardrooms. But some of the work that has most changed this country happened in a spare bedroom in Brampton on a second-hand laptop by a woman who had more vision than resources and more persistence than anyone in this room has yet found a way to properly measure." The room applauded. Solène walked to the stage. She shook the Deputy Minister's hand. She accepted the award, a piece of glass shaped like a maple leaf that she would give to her mother, who would put it on the mantel next to the photo of Solène's father, who had died when she was 11 and had never seen any of this. She did not cry. She did not have notes. She spoke for 3 minutes and 30 seconds, which she knew because she had a precise relationship with time. She said, "I grew up without much. But I grew up watching. I watched what worked and what didn't, what was built to last and what wasn't. I learned that the most dangerous thing you can do in business is assume that resources are the same thing as capability. They are not the same thing. I have seen very resourced people build very little, and I have seen people with almost nothing build the things that last." She paused. "I want to thank the people who believed in this work early when it was harder to believe in. You know who you are, and I want to thank the people who didn't, because doubt, turns out, is a very efficient fuel." The room laughed, then the room applauded. She walked back to her table. Across the room, Preston was applauding with everyone else. She could see his hands moving together. She could not see his face clearly from this distance, but she did not need to. She had known that face for 11 years. She knew what it looked like. When a man was reassembling something he had not expected to need to reassemble. After the formal program ended, the evening dissolved into the usual end-of-event configuration. Clusters of people exchanging cards, the bar doing better business, the string quartet switching to something more ambient. Solène spoke to the Deputy Minister for 10 minutes. She spoke to the young woman from Winnipeg, whose name was Ife, for 15, and gave her Breed's number and told her to call next week. She spoke to 2 journalists, one from the Financial Post and one from a Toronto tech publication, and said the things she was willing to say and did not say the things she wasn't. She was preparing to leave when she became aware that Preston was standing near the exit. Not blocking it, not waiting in a way that announced itself, but there, in the way that is unmistakable when you have known someone long enough to read the grammar of how they occupy a room. She walked toward the exit. Geneviève, who had spent the evening at a respectful distance, moved slightly. Solène gave a small, almost invisible shake of her head. Geneviève settled. She stopped a few feet from Preston. "The doubt line," he said. "That was good. Thank you," she said. He was quiet for a moment. Something moved across his face that she had seen before. Not in the last 3 years, but before that, in the years when she had still believed they were building something together. Something that looked like the recognition of a distance that could not be crossed from where he was standing. "Solène," he said, "I want you to know what I said back then about the startup world not being Preston," she said, not unkindly. He stopped. "I know," she said. "It's all right." She did not mean it the way people mean it when they are forgiving something. She meant it the way you mean it when something is simply, actually, all right, when it has been metabolized, when it has become part of the structure of what you built rather than a wound you are still tending. He looked at her. He nodded once. He was not a bad man. He had never been a bad man. He had been a man who had looked at her and seen something smaller than what was there. And that was a particular kind of mistake, and it had cost him accordingly. "Congratulations," he said. "Really?" "Good night, Preston," she said. The car was waiting on King Street. October in Toronto at 10:30 at night, and the air had that particular quality it gets in the fall, clean and slightly sharp, the smell of the lake somewhere under everything, the city doing what the city does, witches continue. She sat in the back seat, and Daphne sat in the front, and neither of them said anything for a moment. Then Daphne said, "How was it?" Solène looked out the window. A man was walking a very large dog past the hotel entrance. A group of young people spilled out of a bar on Wellington, laughing at something she couldn't hear. A courier on a bike moved through the amber light at the intersection with the particular confidence of someone who has calculated the exact margin of safety and is comfortable with it. "It was a good evening," she said. She meant it. The car moved north through the city, and the lights blurred in the way. City lights blur when you are moving past them at the right speed. And Solène Ibarra, who had grown up in Brampton in a house where the windows faced a parking lot, and the library had been the only place with fast enough internet, and the sky had been ordinary and beautiful. In the way ordinary things are beautiful when you learn to look at them properly. Solène sat back and closed her eyes and let the city pass.